session of the Larimer County Board of Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. I am Tom Donnelly. I am the chairman of the Board of Commissioners this year, joined by John Cafalas, Commissioner from District 1, Steve Johnson, Commissioner from District 2. Our County Manager, Linda Hoffman, is here at the controls. This afternoon, the Board has a work session regarding the 2019-2023 Strategic Plan, specifically goals number 1 and 3. There's a number of folks who are with us in the room today, so for those who may be listening in, I would ask maybe you guys introduce yourselves so people can put a voice with a name. We'll start with you, Bridget.
Bridget Paris. I'm the HR Director and the Goal Steward for Strategic Goal 3.
Okay, Lori?
Yes, I'm Lori Cadridge, and I am the Interim Director for Community Planning and Infrastructure Resources and the Goal Steward for Goal 1.
Great. Who'd like to begin?
I'm Linda Hoffman, the County Manager,
Oh,
and
you
I'll
would
begin.
like to begin. Okay. Welcome.
So this is our quarterly update to the Commissioners on the strategic plan. There are 3 goals. We have separated out goal number 2 because we think that that will take a little longer, and so she is scheduled separately. I don't have that date in front of me, but it's coming up and will be on the published calendar. So today, the whole theme of the strategic plan this time around is really getting our community ready for the future, and we think that there are things that we should be doing in the community and in our own organization to both accommodate growth and just the change in our community demographically and functionally and culturally. And so our first goal has to do with physical infrastructure that we'll be hearing about today. The third goal has to do with our own internal operations, building the organization of the future. And then the second goal that we'll hear about at a subsequent work session are our programs and services. I give this same 3-minute thing, so maybe I'll get better at the elevator speech each quarter. But Larimer County approaches our strategic plan in a slightly different way than some other organizations of our type. We do not put all of our services into our strategic plan because if you take a soup to nuts approach, that's not terribly strategic. The whole meaning of the word strategic is to be focused, and so the commissioners have focused on these 3 goals and specific objectives under those goals that will meet our needs. Many of those objectives and goals will become operational in the future and will be rolled into our core services. So in the last strategic plan cycle, we added emergency management, economic development, and behavioral health, and all of those are now core services. So they are of great importance in the community, and the commissioners always fund core services first and strategic plan goals second, because the core services are what our community counts on day in and day out, and the strategic plan goals are the ones that are moving us forward. So we use objectives that are SMART. That's an acronym that stands for Smart, Measurable, Achievable, Realistic, and Time-Stamped, so we can tell when we actually reach the finish line, or candidly, when we don't. So it's a way, these quarterly monitoring exercises are a way of keeping the commissioners and the community abreast of the work that we're doing, ask for corrections to our course, and report to you the progress. So that was a longer elevator speech than I intended, but I hope it does set the context of how we approach the strategic plan. And we might as well start with goal number 1, Lori, if you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready this quarter. Last quarter I wasn't quite as ready. So goal number 1 is Larimer County works collaboratively to ensure adequate public infrastructure is available to support the needs of our growing community. And we have 4 separate objectives to reach this goal. And the first objective was related to regional transportation. And I'm sure the Board of County Commissioners are aware that our objective was to get a regional transportation tax and address Tier 1 priorities for around the county to improve our infrastructure related to transportation, including transit options as well as building road capacity. And at least as of last night, that measure was not looking like it would pass. And so that is the update on that one. And I would welcome any board input as to provide direction on where you would like us to head next on that.
We're not ready to give you that.
It might not be the right forum for that.
That's true. Thank you. The second objective we had was by the end of 2023, Tier 1 improvements identified within the solid waste infrastructure master plan will be constructed and placed into operation to establish core municipal solid waste disposal infrastructure for the next 30 years and achieve a minimum landfill diversion rate of 40%. And the progress to date has been very positive regarding our Tier 1 improvements. And just to remind potentially the audience of what those improvements are, is the central transfer station, the new county northern landfill, yard waste organics processing, or most people would know it by composting, and a construction and demolition processing facility. And in addition to that, the board recommended establishing a solid waste policy council that included all the agencies that are part of the waste shed plan. And we have held our first meeting in September. Our second meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. And we'll be building a work plan for how best to support the Board of County Commissioners related to our Tier 1 improvements, as well as the intergovernmental agreements related to the waste shed plan. And I'm also happy to report that we had another community join the Waste Shed Coalition, and that was formalized on October 22nd, and that community is Wellington. We've additionally done outreach to the Town Board of Wellington to update them on the status of the waste shed plan. And this Saturday we'll be holding a neighborhood meeting as well for folks who are living around the landfill and updating them on the status of the plan and where we're at. So that is goal 2. On goal 3, we're just getting this one back up to date. We've held about 3 meetings, and this objective relates to a comprehensive rural, what's called infrastructure strategy or road strategy, to figure out what the county's responsibility should be in maintaining roads and bringing them up to certain kinds of standards. And to date, we have met with the county attorney's office, staff from engineering, road and bridge, and we're looking at what our current policies and processes are. We've identified that we have a variety of different agreements for different subdivisions that have happened over the years. We have a more unified practice since 1994, but prior to that there are various kinds of agreements. So we're conducting an inventory right now to see if there's some commonality in those agreements. We're also checking with other counties who have attempted to develop what's called a master improvement district for their area to see if there are ways that we can make it easier for subdivisions to become involved in improvement districts, or maybe more strategic in how those improvement districts are formed. And we'll be continuing to develop options and bring those back to the board. In addition to that part of the goal, there are also 2 other components, and one of them is broadband. And our team has been less engaged in the broadband because there is an additional committee that's working on broadband, and so we've been getting our information from them. And their next meeting is November 20th. The water, wastewater issue, we are currently working together as a working group, and we're going to hold a workshop with regional partners for both water and wastewater at the end of January to start a regional conversation about how we can work together. And we hope that that conversation will help to inform what our partners need and help us better identify what to recommend for the county's role in that. And the last objective that we have is to complete a regional watershed management effort to improve mitigation efforts for flood-related hazards, to promote water sharing strategies to preserve agriculture and sustain water supplies, and then to establish the management and funding solutions for the NRCS dams, or the B dams as most people call them. I believe the board is up to date on our work with the B dams, as well as looking at the relationship or partnerships that we have with Fort Collins, Wellington, and Timnath and North Pooter Irrigation to look at those areas and bring back different options for the board to consider on how to stabilize the dams. The one thing that came up as we were meeting with our committees and that I'm wondering if the board would comment on or assist with is in goal number 4, we have a piece that's called promote water sharing strategies, and that's the piece tied to agriculture and water supplies. We're thinking that that may overlap with the work that we're doing in goal number 3 related to the water and wastewater structure. And we're wondering if the board would be concerned if we moved that piece into goal number 3 and had that as part of the regional conversation as well.
That's your recommendation?
That is my recommendation, in knowing that I wasn't here when these goals were put together, so I don't have a good idea of how the goals were developed in terms of whether it was deliberate to separate those two ideas or whether it was inadvertent in how they got separated. But it seems like we could incorporate how to take care of agricultural water at the same time we're having a regional conversation about long-term planning for water supply.
Lori, I think at the time that these objectives were developed, the water and wastewater part of objective, is that 3?
Mm-hmm.
Was really more related to domestic water supply and trying to make sure that the district boundaries and interconnects between districts were providing optimal results. The main focus of this portion of Objective 4 was water sharing agreements like we did at Mauchow Farms that are agricultural preservation related more specifically. Now, obviously, those two things are tied because a water sharing agreement is typically done with a domestic water supply purveyor. So they're related, and I think the way they got in two different objectives was the origin of the thought.
Okay.
In one case, the origin of the thought was, let's make sure we're building efficient infrastructure even across district boundaries, versus in terms of watershed health, there's nothing better than agriculture to protect the long-term interests of Larimer County. So I think that that's how it came about, but that doesn't mean that it has to stay that way.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I would actually agree with County Manager's assessment that, to me, regional watershed management is a much broader issue, and it's not just about ag-related things. It's, if you look at one of our 6 areas in the comprehensive plan, it talks about natural resources and watershed management, and so I think it could be related to forest health, upstream and those kinds of things. So that, in my opinion, that's why I think this should be separated out, because I think it's broader issues. And the other thing I would mention is, interestingly, Lori and colleagues, our next Water Literate Leaders class, November 20th, we're actually having it out at the City of Fort Collins wastewater plant out there by the Environmental Learning Center. And the topic for that class will be on wastewater issues, municipal issues. And so what I would suggest is, if there are specific questions that I could raise, I could ask at that class, that might help inform the work of, at least for the water wastewater objective.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seems reasonable.
So
Okay.
we'll keep them separate, and then this will provide me some information to get back to the goal leaders on the difference between the two and the different way to approach it.
And if there might be some questions you guys have that I could offer at November 20th class, that might help us.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
I think this is probably the first time I've really read goal or objective number 4, and it really isn't written very well, consistent with our other measurable goals. So by the end of 2020, that's the time factor. We will improve mitigation efforts. So there's no measurable assessment of what improvement means, or we will promote water sharing. I don't know what that means. It's not measurable. I won't know at the end of 2020, have we promoted it? Does that mean we want another county to do what we did? Does that mean we want to have another Malchow Farm purchase in Larimer County? 3, I think, paren 3 is measurable. We either have a funding solution to that issue or we don't. But 1 and 2, I don't think there's any way to determine whether or not those have been met.
Okay, that's a good point.
I don't know. It may be a little late to point that out, but
Well,
it might be the first time I've really read this one carefully. Because all these other ones are really good. I mean, it's when you know whether you've either done it or not.
Okay.
And we wanted these goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time stamped, right?
if it's acceptable to the board, then I can work
Take
with
that
our,
back to your group and see.
right, work with our group and bring back
Maybe
either
they
one
have-
idea,
yeah,
a
they may have an
recommendation, or a
idea
couple
about
of different
They
ideas.
may know what we're thinking about, but at least in the wording here, there's no way to tell whether or not we've met them.
Okay.
Just my input. Okay, for what it's worth.
Helpful. Thank you, Lori. So Commissioner Donnelly, you're the executive sponsor for this goal. Did you want to make any comments or?
No, just going well.
Okay.
Great.
All right, very good.
We're going to have to reevaluate some stuff, but it's going to be fine. We're going to do the best we can.
All right, very good. So goal number 3, Bridget Paris is the goal steward and Commissioner Johnson is the executive sponsor.
Yay, Bridget.
Take it away, team.
Yay, Bridget.
Larimer County government is ready to support the future service needs of our residents and visitors. That's the goal we are working with. Our first objective deals with staff workspaces, reducing square footage in the facilities master plan. With our current status, it was following the election, a work plan will be updated showing the many components and milestones involved and a general timeline of what's to come. That will remain our course of action. The work plan is going to be a little bit more complex and will look a little different, but as of now, we plan to still create that work plan. We are scheduled to do a facilities master plan update in 2020, and that will still continue. And I know Ken is here also if you have specific questions, but we are only a day after the election, so right now we'll continue to work.
And that update includes the Justice Center as well, right?
We'll have Ken come up.
So we talked this morning, and the original master plan was looking at what should we do for the 20-year future of the community. And the strategy at that time was that we should take on our 20-year needs in kind of 3 tranches. The first one was pulling money out of the couch cushions and pants pockets like we've been talking about to build a group of facilities that are currently underway. The second group of facilities were on the ballot that appears to have not been supported by the voters. And the final set of facilities we're going to have to wait until 2029 or 30 when the big TIF districts expire. So we spoke this morning about, as we update the master plan, instead of looking at what should be done with our long-term view glasses on, we may have to put on our lenses of saying, what can we do to meet shorter-term needs in order to meet at least the short-term needs of the community, even if they were not as long-range thinking as the original master plan was focused on. Ken can probably say it better than that, but that was the gist of what we talked about.
I'm not sure I can say it any better, but I guess the only thing I would add is that.
You identify yourself, sir?
Sorry? Oh,
Identify yourself.
yeah, Ken Cooper, Facilities Director.
For the record.
Leader. Thank you.
I'm just trying to practice.
Exactly. Yeah, no.
The only additional piece to that I would add is that we had planned for a formal update to the master plan roughly every 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, and so this fits with that. We had intended for most of that to be done internally, that the program was put together and the tool was put together so that it could be transferable over to the county and not require as deep, nearly as deep a dive as what the initial project included. We may want to look at ramping that up just a little bit to get a little bit more external involvement, particularly because we have a new set of constraints now that we didn't have, during the initial information gathering, and so the data that was collected at mostly in 2017 as a component of the master plan likely hasn't changed an awful lot from department to department, but what has changed now is the ability to meet or satisfy a good number of those needs as they are designed or described in the master plan. So with that new overlay of financial constraint, the effort to have that that data kind of spit out a plan to address those things on the short-term needs as well is probably a much different model than what we were anticipating with a successful ballot. And so we're going to look at that. I've got a meeting set up with the folks from our consultant company that we use, Stantec, out of Denver this week, and we'll be working pretty quickly to try to provide a good definition of what that might look like as a new model for what that process would include, and obviously the accompanying costs, which shouldn't be a lot different, but will be somewhat different if we get on that path. So.
Great.
Good. All right. Objective 2.
Thank you, Ken.
3, isn't it?
2. It's goal 3, objective 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't worry.
Got it.
Objective 2 is looking at what characteristics in our workforce we will need in 5 years to be successful. And I provided you a second sheet because we're really proud of the characteristics that we identified.
Great.
There are 3 characteristics that have been identified by that objective team. Adaptable, the ability and willingness to learn and grow while demonstrating flexibility and resiliency in an ever-changing work environment. Collaborative, the ability and willingness to be open-minded, team-oriented, and solution-driven while working with others. And inclusive, the ability and willingness to authentically contribute to a workplace culture that is empathetic, accepting, open-minded, and compassionate. First order of business is figuring out how to establish how those characteristics are reflective in our current workforce. And the team has, in my opinion, decided to start with measuring the most difficult, which is inclusive. And so they're going to start with that and work with some experts in the field. They're hoping to have that measurement or assessment tool done in early 2020. They'll take that to our senior leadership committee and have that vetted and start to work on creating that baseline. Once we've created the baseline measurement, we'll then work with activities through recruitment, training, development, all of those opportunities to move that needle. There's a lot of connection between this objective and Heather's. I don't know her number, but I know that it's Katie O'Donnell.
Objective number 2.
Is it 2? Perfect, 2 and 2. That will work good. Katie and I and Christine are meeting tomorrow morning also to talk about how this characteristic of inclusion ties in with the disability objective and the hiring in the workforce of individuals with disabilities. So those two are hooking together well, and we'll keep up and try and stay together on that effort. Objective 3, this is adapting service delivery for changing demographics of recipients of the services, I guess, because it could be internal or external. We have a larger objective team for this, and we have split into 5 smaller teams by service category. And those smaller teams are going to each service category to solicit services to be adapted, modified. We are doing much better getting the service recommendations from those groups. We learned at our last meeting, which isn't on here, but I thought was worth sharing, one of the high priority items from all the service categories was the ability to adapt or deliver their services in Spanish, essentially. That was the priority language, that communication seems to be a barrier, either by forms, by outreach, in some way that they deliver their service. So as an objective team, we decided to take that on for all the service categories, if possible, to talk about what that might look like, and then also to do a service adaptation specifically in each service category. So we're excited about that. I think that outreach and that need across those service categories has really been clear. It was interesting that it showed up across all of them. Objective 4 is our leverage current data analysis techniques and shared software tools. Last time we met, we had some identified projects, and they were written in some technical language, of which we received feedback that could we please put those into better English. The team went back, still a technical team, and gave it another try. So I hope that that will clarify the language. I know they're still working on those. They are a team that really wants to communicate better and are working on strategies for communication across the county. Since the 4 projects identified here will impact county employees, the work they do in multiple departments. So they're starting their communication strategy, and I'll continue to work on that language. All right, and objective 5 is our policy on environmental responsibility. Last time we saw you, we asked to modify that objective to get approval to say not only can we create a policy, but could we also add some language that would support implementing that policy. Right now, the policy came through the board through consent on October 29th after we reviewed that policy with you. And we have included a proposal to help with the implementation to the DOLA grant for an intern. And so that group, as far as deciding next steps, is patiently waiting on whether that's something that we'll be able to provide. But they are excited to go forward and have started specific groups in departments where this policy is most impacted. Ta-da.
Yeah.
That's all, folks.
I wish I would have thought of that.
I know, I was like,
Questions? Do you have any questions, guys?
I feel like there should be something.
You have any questions, John?
I don't think so.
Great work. Linda?
I think it's very important to thank our goal stewards and our objective leaders and all the team members. Larimer County accomplishes this work as other duties as assigned, which is pretty amazing because I don't think that we have staff members sitting around looking for work to do, and yet we have had many staff members raise their hands and say they're willing to take on something more for the future of our community. So thank you to our objective leaders, thank you to our goal stewards, and thank you to all the team members who are putting in extraordinary effort. Thank you all for such good work.
Yeah, well said.
Ta-da.
Very good. Anything else to come before the board this afternoon?
Not today, Commissioner.
Very good. The board will stand adjourned. We're going to be in Estes Park this evening. Thanks, everybody.